Ryan, for meeting with me today and just doing a quick introduction regarding the upcoming Pushing the Line program that you're going to be teaching as part of that. I just wondered if we could start with how you describe your practice and where teaching fits within it.
So I've been making art for about 25 years or so, and I started teaching fairly on in that process. So my practice, I studied as a painter, but I work also these days mostly in drawing. But I do a whole range of things. So I do a bit of installation, quite a bit of photography, some sculpture. My last show I even had a conversation with a psychic medium. Uh, so it ranges across a whole bunch of different things. And I think of drawing as being sort of any daily activity in a sense, even though I'm trained fairly classically as a drawer and I spent my first sort of 6 or 7 years just obsessively learning to draw and do detailed drawings. And I still do that sometimes. But yeah, I would use my first pretentious term of the day. I'd consider what I do the expanded field of drawing, what often people call this as the expanded field of drawing. So I will do drawings using a pencil, but I do all sorts of other things like collect things and arrange them, take photographs. Yeah, all sorts of little things that I still consider part of the philosophy of drawing one way or another.
Yeah. And teaching, have you?
So in the teaching, my
Yeah.
approach to teaching takes that on board. So I tend not to be an exercisey type of teacher, to put something on a table and ask everybody to draw that. I want to make sure that everybody's starting to develop their own language early on in the drawing process. I think that if I put say a bunch of flowers in the middle of a room and ask people to draw it, the people who are interested in flowers are probably going to do a more interesting drawing. And so, yeah, I'd like to try and encourage students to think about what it is that interests them as a starting point, and not just have this kind of abstract idea that I have to get good at drawing and then later on I'll do my real work.
Why do you think it's important to step outside of your comfort zone and do things that challenge what you know in your practice?
Well, I think that's probably true of anything. I recently did some dancing and I'm a really bad dancer. Same with yoga. I think drawing's one of those things, isn't it, that particularly if you're drawing a person or a portrait, it can be quite confronting if you can't get a likeness, and that's sort of put some people off. So when I'm teaching, I like right from the very beginning, try and set everyone at ease about that, and we're just learning a language,
Mm.
like we would if we were learning any other kind of language. And then once you take that approach, you can generally take more risks, I think. Perhaps in the same way that if you say you're learning French, and then you go to France and you're kind of suddenly thrown into the culture, you tend to learn a lot more quickly when you do that. So I think that probably applies to drawing too. Once you kind of lose that fear of that people aren't going to like what you've done, and you just start to do it and engage with other people in the room, it's a very freeing experience.
A comfort with discomfort or risk.
Yeah, I think, and that probably applies to any skill that you learn. So I don't think it's something that's unique to art. But perhaps the difference with art is often you're doing playful things, particularly with things like drawing and sculpture. You're often doing things that you didn't do after primary school sometimes,
Mm.
and so allowing yourself to play with the materials. And really play is a form of risk taking, where you don't care anymore and you just kind of see what happens. Yeah, so maybe that's the aspect that makes art unique, because it's a playful kind of thing. Or the arts, not just the visual arts, but all the arts really have that in common.
What made you want to teach Pushing the Line or be part of this project?
So I like the idea of, I've always liked the idea of collaborating with other artists. It's something I do in my practice quite a lot. So I really like the idea of getting a cohort of people together and having different people's input and different people's opinion. And I'm hoping that we'll contradict each other a bit and throw a cat amongst the pigeons and confuse you a little bit to start with, because I find fairly early on that there are probably some universal truths in terms of learning to draw, but there's also lots of different ways of approaching it. So I'm always interested in that. I'm always interested in how different artists come to their practice in the first place and how they approach it. The other thing, I suppose, is that as teachers, we're always wanting to learn from our students. And so I don't see it as a normal sort of classroom type situation. it's much more like a collaboration,
Mm,
and the teachers in this case have got more experience. When people come to these classes, we want to think of them to think of themselves as artists, as our contemporaries, and we're showing them some techniques, but they might be able to demonstrate some techniques too that we haven't seen before. Part of a broader conversation that all artists like to have. The other thing I should say too is that it's important to remember that artists are often in their studios for long periods of time. So we really enjoy these opportunities to interact with other people who are interested in art and just talk about the thing that we're obsessed with.
mm, great. And you've touched on it a little bit, but could you tell us a little bit more, without giving it away, about what students might expect to explore with you on their Pushing the Line Day?
So my focus will be on finding everyday objects as a starting point. So we'll do a little bit of walking around as part of the process. Walking has always been an important part of my drawing practice. So, for example, I had a studio for several years, and every day from my house to my studio, I would collect a single object, and then over a period of time, I built up a range of objects and started to draw them. So that's one little exercise that we'll try. It's an exercise, not an exercise. It's a practice, I suppose, in not only the drawing itself, but learning how to observe and
Yeah.
learning how to find your subject and find things that are interesting. I've got particular skills also in botanical illustration and fine drawing. So I've got some examples on my website of large scale tree drawings that I've done. So I'll show some of those, I guess, skills that I've learnt over a period of time. I'm also planning to show you a little bit of watercolor in relation to pencil and to show the crossover between watercolor and pencil and things like biro and pen, just to
Mm.
show you the range of drawing materials that you can use.